Tori Petry down here in Mobile, Alabama for the Lions Road to the Draft coverage of the Senior Bowl. And I am joined by Albert Breer. Albert, you come out here to the Senior Bowl every year. We're going to talk a little bit about what's going on the field here in Mobile. But first, let's talk about Matt Patricia's first year as head coach of the Detroit Lions. What did you make of his first year?
Well, I think there's certainly some culture shock in the building. And that was something that I think with any of the Patriot guys you're going to have to account for. And you're going to account for some pushback. And so I think we saw that. Now the key, I think, is what they're looking for in players. They've got a year down now, a year of drafting players, a year of signing players into that system. And so, now I think you're through your honeymoon period and you want to start to see results, especially because this isn't a rebuild. This was, you've got a quarterback who's in his prime, invested a lot in the offensive line. You've got some pieces on defense. It feels to me like this would, if they're going where they want to go, this would be the season they turn the corner.
All right, well, the biggest news for the Lions recently has been the hiring of their new offensive coordinator, Darrell Bevell. What did you think of that hire?
Yeah, and I thought it was really interesting because Matt could have gone back to the well and hired somebody he knows. He could have promoted George Godsey from the quarterback coach spot. I think what I was impressed with what Matt did was it really looked to me, and you sort of heard this a little bit too, that he was looking at guys who he had trouble with as a defensive coach. I think it's a smart way to look at it. And, you sort of bring a different philosophy into the building and somebody who's going to bring new ideas in. Look, one of the guys that he brought in was Nathaniel Hackett, who got an offense with Blake Bortles at quarterback to the AFC Championship game. Matt coached against him in that AFC Championship game, and the Jaguars did give them problems. So that was one name. And then, of course, Darrell Bevell and the Seahawks have moved the ball on the Patriots in the past, most notably in that Super Bowl. And so I think that part of it was really, really interesting, that Matt really focused on guys who had given him trouble in the past rather than just, looking at his phone, going down his contacts and picking out a couple names.
Well, something that the Lions have emphasized is committing to the ground game. And they said they wanted a more balanced offense this coming year. Do you think they get that in Bevell?
And I think that the one interesting detail I was able to pick up about the whole process is that Jeff Davidson, the line coach, was in the interviews, and that to me, I think, signals where they're going. The line coach typically is the run game coordinator. Jeff Davidson does serve in that role for the Lions, and I think the feeling that they wanted to establish themselves in that phase of the game was part of the reason why there was some friction between Matt and Jim Bob Cooter. And so I think now you bring in people, you hire people who are sort of fit into what you're looking for. Seattle, of course, has had historically one of the best running games in the league. You look at the last 10 years, they're up there with anybody running the ball. They've run the ball creatively. So I think you certainly look at bringing Kerryon Johnson back and hopefully injury-free in 2019, and then all that you've invested in that offensive line, whether it's Ragnow or Decker, TJ Lang, all the guys that you've invested in that offensive line, you'd have to think that their expectation is the production is going to take another tick up in 2019.
Well, and Bevell's worked with some really good quarterbacks and some really good running backs in his time, and he's got Matthew Stafford and Kerryon Johnson. Seems like he's got some tools to work with. Yeah,
there's no question, and I think that piece of it, and look, if you want to look at the way New England built their operation on offense, and it's basically all Matt knows. That's where he came from, and that's where he spent all his time in the NFL before he got to Detroit. There's a big investment and emphasis on the guys up front and being able to control the game through those five guys up front. And so that's Dante Scarnecchia in New England, the investment there, and what they did to bring him back a couple of years ago. And then, one of the most stable positions on the entire team over the last 15 years outside of quarterback's been left tackle. And so I think you look at, Bob Quinn started that process before Matt got there. But I think you certainly see how much they're investing in that area. It's really, really important to them.
All right, well, we know they wanted to improve the offense, but as always, as the season ends, the draft process starts, and we start looking at different areas the team could improve as they go into the draft. We're at the Senior Bowl here, so it's the perfect place to start talking about this conversation. What are some position groups you could see them targeting this year in the draft?
I certainly think, and I think they feel comfortable with Galladay at receiver and what he can bring to the table as potentially like a 1A type of guy. I really think the focus is going to be on finding a defensive playmaker, a defensive difference maker or two. And the good news for the Lions is that that's where the talent is in this year's draft. Like the defensive linemen, the tackles, the edge rushers. I mean, there could be 15 or 20 of them that go in the first round. So where the Lions are picking, there's a good chance you're going to be able to have a shot at a good one, whether you want an edge rusher or D tackle. And so my sense is that a defensive difference maker in general is something that they would look at. They've got a good player in the secondary in Darius Slay. They've got a good young linebacker in Jared Davis. And so it makes sense that they would look up front for that sort of thing. And, I mean, this is probably one of the best groups of defensive linemen coming out in the last 10 or 20 years.
All right, well, we are looking forward to seeing how this draft process unfolds. Thank you so much, Albert, for joining us here at the Senior Bowl.
All right, thanks, Tori.
That's Albert Breer for DetroitLions.com. I'm Tori Petry.